Hey there. So, have you ever put a brand new smart sensor in your fridge or freezer, looked at the app, and just thought, that can't be right? It's a super common thing. Today, we're going to dig into how to get truly accurate temperature readings in these tricky low temperature spots.
Right, so let's set the scene. You've got your new Macrio sensor, you pop it in the fridge, and you're excited to see the data. But when you check your phone, the temperature seems off. It doesn't match what the fridge door says, and the graph is jumping all over. Your first thought is probably, did I get a broken one? Well, let me tell you, it's almost definitely working perfectly. The real story is actually way more interesting.
And that leads us right into the first big idea here. The problem usually isn't with the sensor at all. It's that we don't really think about the secret life of our refrigerators. We see it as just a cold box, right? But in reality, it's a really dynamic and complex machine.
And this is the key takeaway. Unlike a regular room in your house where the temperature is pretty stable, your refrigerator's temperature is supposed to go up and down. It's constantly running through different cycles that are completely normal, but they can look pretty weird on a sensitive sensor if you don't know what you're looking at.
Okay, so what about those really big, sudden temperature spikes you might be seeing? That's almost always the auto defrost cycle. Yeah, believe it or not, to stop itself from turning into a giant block of ice, your fridge actually turns on a heater for a little while. Your sensor isn't glitching, it's just showing you this totally normal process. Once you know this, you can adjust your alerts so they don't go off during these short, normal cycles. And what about those smaller and more regular ups and downs, the ones that make the graph look kind of like a sawtooth? Well, that's just the compressor doing its job, kicking on to cool things down and then turning off for a bit. It's literally the heartbeat of your refrigerator, and your sensor is sensitive enough to show it to you. So once you get a handle on these normal cycles, it really helps you avoid what I like to call the comparison trap, which is probably the #1 reason people get confused when they first start using a smart sensor. You might be tempted to stick an old-school glass thermometer next to your Mocrio sensor to see if it's right, but it's not really a fair comparison. That traditional thermometer gives you one number, a single snapshot in time. The Mocrio sensor, on the other hand, tells you the whole story. It shows you the trends, the cycles, the history. It's really the difference between looking at one single photograph versus watching the entire movie. Okay, but what about the digital display right there on the fridge door? Surely that's accurate, right? Well, not really, and for 3 big reasons. First, location. The fridge's built-in sensor is usually stuck right next to the super cold cooling coils, not where your food is. Second, that number is often the target temperature the fridge is aiming for, not the actual temperature on your shelf. And finally, cold air is almost never spread out evenly. The top shelf can easily be 10 degrees or even more, different from the bottom drawer. All right, so now that we understand what's really happening inside that fridge, how do we make sure we're getting the best, most useful readings? Let's talk about some practical, hands-on tips. This picture really shows you everything you need to know. Placement is absolutely key. You want to put your sensor on a middle shelf, kind of in the center, and definitely away from the back wall or any direct air vents. That spot is going to give you the most stable and honest picture of the temperature your food is actually sitting in. And if you've got a sensor with an external probe, same deal. Get that little probe right into the middle of the action. And here's another pro tip. You've got to be patient. When you take a sensor from a warm room and stick it in a cold freezer, it needs a little time to adjust, to acclimate. As you can see here, a standard probe like a DS18B20 needs about 40 minutes to really settle in and give you a true read-in. The PT100 probe is a little faster, about 20 minutes. The bottom line is, don't judge the numbers in the first half hour or so. Let the sensor chill out. But what if you're still a little skeptical? Hey, that's fair. Here's a super simple test you can do yourself to put your mind at ease. Just take 2 sensors of the exact same model and place them right next to each other. Let them sit there for a day or two, then pull up their data graphs in the app. If you see their curves rising and falling together, tracking each other closely, you can be 100% confident that both sensors are working perfectly. Now, let's say you do that side-by-side test, and you notice a very small but very consistent difference between the two. Maybe one always reads just a degree higher than the other. The Mocrio app has a tool for that. It's called temperature compensation, and it lets you make tiny adjustments just to nudge the reading up or down a bit to get them perfectly in sync. So we've talked a lot about what's normal, but how can you tell if there's a real problem with the sensor itself? Let's take a look at what an actual malfunction looks like, because it's very different. First, a little peace of mind.
Every Mocreo sensor is put through some really tough testing and is carefully calibrated before it ever leaves the factory. They are designed to be accurate right out of the box, so you really shouldn't ever have to worry about recalibrating them.
So this is the most important part. A real problem looks nothing like a normal defrost cycle. Remember how a defrost cycle is a curve? It goes up gradually and comes down gradually with lots of data points along the way. A potential malfunction, which we call a temperature jump, is a massive instant change with only 2 data points, the reading right before the jump and the reading right after. On the graph, it looks like a straight vertical line, not a curve or a sawtooth. That's the real signal to look for.
And that kind of brings us full circle. The real magic of a smart sensor isn't just seeing a single number. It's about seeing the trends, the cycles, and the patterns over time. So the question I want to leave you with is this. Are you just watching a number anymore, or are you starting to see the whole story? Thanks for diving deep with me on this one.